The smile was the first thing I noticed. Not her dress, not the designer purse, not the way she placed her sunglasses on the table as if my courtroom were a hotel lobby. The smile, a slow, confident, polished smile that told me Vanessa Caldwell had walked into many rooms believing her last name would do most of the talking. And for the first few minutes, she tried to make it do exactly that. She smiled when the plaintiff spoke. She smiled when I asked for documents. She even smiled when she leaned toward me and said, "With respect, Your Honor, you don't understand how families like mine handle things." That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was thinking I would be impressed by the word millionaire. Her third mistake was bringing a folder full of accusations into a courtroom where the truth had brought receipts. By the end of that hearing, Vanessa Caldwell's smile was gone so completely that even the people sitting in the gallery stopped whispering, because what exposed her was not loud, it was quiet, it was signed. And it came from the one person she thought she had already silenced. Before we go any further, make sure you have subscribed to this channel for more powerful courtroom stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Also, comment below and tell us where you are watching this video from. Now, let me take you back to where this case truly began. The case was filed by a woman named Rachel Morgan. Rachel was 34 years old, a private caregiver and part-time medical aide. She was suing Vanessa Caldwell for unpaid wages, damaged property, and money she said Vanessa had taken from her after falsely accusing her of stealing from Vanessa's father, Charles Caldwell. Charles Caldwell was a wealthy real estate investor. His name appeared on office buildings, charity programs, donor plaques, and local business articles. He had money, reputation, and a daughter who clearly believed both of those things belonged to her by inheritance before her father was even gone. Rachel did not look like someone used to standing in court. She wore a simple gray jacket, black pants, and shoes that had been polished carefully but were visibly worn at the edges. She held a binder with both hands, not casually, firmly, like it contained the only protection she had. There was something else I noticed about her. She kept glancing at her phone, not scrolling, not texting, just checking the screen for 1 second at a time. I asked her, "Are you expecting an emergency call?" Rachel looked embarrassed. "Yes, Your Honor. My son's school knows I'm here. He has a seizure disorder. They said they'd only call if something happened." That answer changed the emotional weight of the room immediately. Rachel was not just a worker asking for payment. She was a mother standing in court while part of her mind remained with a child who might need her at any moment. I asked her son's name. "Tyler," she said softly. "He's 9. Vanessa smiled at that. Not warmly, tolerantly, as if Rachel had just introduced an excuse. I saw it. Rachel saw it too. And that told me Vanessa had used that smile before. I asked Rachel to explain why she was there. Rachel said she had been hired to care for Charles Caldwell after he suffered complications from heart surgery. The agreement was straightforward: 5 days a week, $22 an hour, additional weekend hours if approved by text. Rachel helped with meals, medication reminders, walking assistance, laundry, light cleaning, and transportation to follow-up appointments. Vanessa interrupted before Rachel finished. She was not a nurse. I looked at Vanessa. "Did I ask you?" Her smile tightened. "No, Your Honor, but I want the record accurate." The record becomes accurate when people answer the questions asked. The gallery went quiet. Vanessa leaned back, still smiling, but not as comfortably now. Rachel continued. She said she worked for the Caldwell household for nearly 4 months. At first, Charles was polite, quiet, and embarrassed that he needed help. Vanessa handled payments and scheduling. But after the first month, Rachel said Vanessa began adding tasks that had nothing to do with caregiving: picking up dry cleaning, organizing closets, serving guests during private dinners, cleaning after Vanessa's friends stayed late, driving Vanessa to boutiques when her own car was being serviced. I asked Rachel if she objected. She looked down. I needed the job, Your Honor. Those 6 words can explain more abuse than many people want to admit. Rachel told me Tyler's medication was expensive, even with insurance. Her ex-husband had stopped paying consistent child support. Her mother helped when she could, but her mother worked nights at a hospital cafeteria and had her own health issues. Rachel said the Caldwell job was the first position in months that offered steady hours, and she could not risk losing it. Vanessa sighed, not loudly, just enough. That was her second interruption, though she used breath instead of words. I looked at her, Miss Caldwell. Your breathing is not testimony. Her face changed. The smile returned quickly, but the room had seen the crack. Rachel opened her binder and showed the written agreement. It was signed by Vanessa Caldwell. The terms were clear. Caregiving duties, hourly rate, weekly payment every Friday, reimbursement for approved purchases. Then Rachel showed messages. Vanessa, can you stay Saturday? Dad is anxious. Vanessa, pick up his prescription. I'll reimburse. Vanessa, guests are coming. Please make sure the downstairs looks presentable. Vanessa, Dad likes you. Don't make this about money every week. I read that last message twice. Don't make this about money every week. People who owe money often act offended when the person earning it remembers the agreement. I asked Vanessa if she wrote those messages. She said, I wrote some of them. Which ones did you not write? Her eyes moved over the page. I'm not saying I didn't write them. I'm saying tone matters. Tone contradicts my misunderstanding. Those words often arrive in court when the actual words are too clear to defend. Rachel said Vanessa started delaying payments after Charles became attached to her. That phrase caught my attention. Attached to her. I asked Rachel what she meant. She said Charles was lonely. His wife had died 5 years earlier. His business friends visited less after his surgery. Vanessa came by when she wanted something signed, approved, paid for, or attended. But ordinary time, quiet time, the kind that makes sick people feel human, came mostly from Rachel. Rachel said Charles liked Tyler too. Sometimes when Rachel's mother could not pick Tyler up after school, Rachel would bring him to the Caldwell house for the last hour of her shift. Tyler would sit at the kitchen table doing homework while Charles watched old baseball games. Charles taught Tyler how to keep score on paper. Tyler, who was usually shy because of his medical condition, began to talk more around him. Rachel's voice broke slightly when she said that. Mr. Caldwell made him feel normal. That sentence mattered. A child with a seizure disorder can begin to feel like a problem everyone is managing. Charles, according to Rachel, treated Tyler like a boy, not a diagnosis. He asked about school. He explained baseball. He let him choose the next puzzle in the newspaper. Vanessa interrupted again. My father was being manipulated. That was the first time the smile disappeared for more than a second. I asked, by a 9-year-old doing homework. The gallery reacted softly. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. She said, by Miss Morgan using her personal life to gain sympathy. Rachel looked down immediately. That reaction told me Vanessa had said something similar before. I asked Vanessa, did you ever tell Rachel she could not bring her son? Vanessa paused. No. Did you ever text her permission to bring him? Rachel handed me a page. Vanessa, fine, bring Tyler, but keep him out of the formal living room. Vanessa looked irritated. Agan, not surprised. I asked Rachel what money was owed. She said $2,960 in unpaid wages, $480 in prescription reimbursements, $300 for a broken phone, and $700 Vanessa had withheld from her final payment after accusing her of stealing a diamond pendant from Charles's study. That brought us to the real accusation, the diamond pendant. Vanessa sat straighter. Her smile returned, but now it had a sharper edge. I asked, Mrs. Caldwell, did you file a police report? Vanessa said, I didn't want to embarrass my father. Did your father say Rachel stole it? He was not in a position to understand what happened. Was he legally incompetent? No, but he was vulnerable. Vulnerable is not the same as unable to tell the truth. Vanessa's smile thinned. Rachel reached into her binder and removed a small plastic sleeve. Inside was a handwritten note. Vanessa's eyes moved to it immediately. I noticed Rachel said, Mr. Caldwell gave me this after Vanessa accused me. Vanessa laughed, not because it was funny, because she was trying to make the evidence look ridiculous before anyone read it. I looked at her. That is not going to work in here. The laugh died. Rachel handed the note to the bailiff. The handwriting was shaky but clear enough. It read, Rachel did not take the pendant. I gave it away before Vanessa asked about it. She is angry because I told her no. The courtroom became very still. Vanessa's smile vanished for the first time. Not completely, but enough. I looked at Rachel. What did he mean? He gave it away. Rachel swallowed. I don't know, Your Honor. He told me if Vanessa blamed me, I should bring that note. I looked at Vanessa. Did you know your father wrote this? Vanessa's face hardened. My father was confused. There it was, the first shield. I asked, was he confused when he signed checks? No answer. Was he confused when he owned property? Still no answer. Was he confused when you needed his approval for household expenses? Vanessa's lips pressed together. Rachel then said quietly, there's more. Vanessa turned toward her. The old smile came back, but now it looked forced, painted over fear. Rachel opened the back of her binder and removed a sealed envelope. On the front was written, for court if my daughter smiles while lying. No one in the courtroom moved. Vanessa stared at the envelope. And that was the moment I understood her smile had never been confidence. It had been a warning because Charles Caldwell had known exactly how his daughter lied. And he had left something behind to make sure I would know too. I let the envelope rest on my bench for a moment before opening it, not for suspense, for respect. A dead man had written those words knowing his daughter well enough to predict not only her lie, but the expressions she would wear while telling it. That is not ordinary family conflict. That is years of observation folded into one sentence. For court, if my daughter smiles while lying. Vanessa Caldwell stared at the envelope as if it had insulted her. Rachel Morgan stared at it differently. She looked relieved, but frightened too. Relief because Charles Caldwell had not left her completely defenseless. Fear because evidence like that usually meant the truth behind it was painful. I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 items, a handwritten letter, a pharmacy receipt, and a photograph of Charles sitting at his kitchen table beside Tyler Rachel's 9-year-old son. In the photograph, Tyler was holding a baseball scorecard and Charles was pointing at the paper with a pen. The boy's face was serious, focused, almost proud. Rachel saw the photograph and immediately began blinking back tears. I asked, did you know he kept this? She shook her head. No, Your Honor. Vanessa said under her breath, unbelievable. I looked up. That was not an invitation. Her mouth closed. I unfolded the letter. Charles's handwriting was shaky, but his mind was not. The first line made that clear. Your Honor, my daughter Vanessa believes money can turn people into furniture. She forgets furniture, does not remember. The courtroom went silent. I continued reading. Rachel Morgan cared for me when I was weak, embarrassed, and angry at my own body. She did not steal from me. She did not manipulate me. She did not ask for gifts. She asked to be paid for work my daughter kept adding to. Rachel lowered her head. Vanessa's face hardened, but the smile did not return. That mattered. The smile had been her shield. The letter had cracked it. Charles wrote that Rachel reminded him of his late wife, not because of romance or manipulation, but because she had the same habit of doing ordinary things with dignity. She warmed soup without making him feel helpless. She wrote medication times on a whiteboard because he hated asking twice. She let Tyler sit in the kitchen only when Vanessa had already given permission, and Charles wrote that the boy brought a quiet room back to life. Rachel wiped her face. I paused there because I understood the emotional center of the case. Rachel was not just fighting for wages. She was fighting against being turned into the villain of a home she had helped hold together. I asked Vanessa, "Did your father ever complain to you about Rachel's care?" Vanessa lifted her chin. "My father did not always understand what was happening around him. Did he complain?" She hesitated. "No. Did you continue asking Rachel to come back?" Vanessa's eyes moved to the text messages. "Yes." "Did you continue leaving your father alone with someone you now claim was dangerous?" No answer. That silence was useful. A false accusation often falls apart when tested against behavior. If Rachel was dangerous, why keep hiring her? If she manipulated Charles, why request extra hours? If she neglected him, why text her at night asking her to come because he was anxious? The answer was simple. Vanessa trusted Rachel until Rachel asked to be paid. Rachel explained more about those final weeks. Charles's recovery had slowed, and his mood had become fragile. He hated feeling dependent. Some days he refused lunch because he said swallowing made him feel old. Other days he stared at his wife's photograph for 20 minutes without speaking. Rachel did not dramatize this. She spoke plainly. That made it more believable. She said, "Tyler understood quiet sadness better than most children. After his first seizure at school, other kids treated him differently. Some were scared of him, some whispered. Tyler had learned to make himself smaller in public, to avoid attention, to avoid being a problem, but with Charles he relaxed. Charles never stared at the medical bracelet. He never panicked when Rachel checked Tyler's medication bag. He simply asked the boy whether the Yankees had any chance that year and complained about modern baseball like an old man with the right to complain. That was how trust formed in that kitchen, not through manipulation, through routine. I asked Rachel when payments changed. She said the first missed payment came after Charles asked Vanessa, in front of Rachel, why she was late paying the woman keeping me alive and fed. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Rachel said, Vanessa smiled at Charles and said, "Dad, don't involve yourself in staff issues." Staff issues. There was that word again, not exactly spoken in court before, but present in every expression Vanessa had worn. Rachel said, after that, Vanessa became colder. She began inspecting the house after Rachel cleaned, texting complaints about fingerprints, nens, napkins, towels, grocery brands. Then she began delaying payment. One Friday became Monday. Monday became next week. Next week became, "Stop pressuring me." Rachel's voice tightened. She said she tried not to panic, but Tyler's medication refill was due, rent was coming, and her mother's car had broken down. Rachel was driving between work, school, pharmacy, and the Caldwell house with a cracked windshield she could not afford to repair. I watched Vanessa while Rachel spoke, nothing, no guilt, no discomfort, only irritation that Rachel's life had entered the record. I asked Rachel about the broken phone. She said she had tried to record Vanessa admitting she owed the money, not secretly in a bedroom. Not during private care, in the kitchen, during a wage argument after Vanessa told her she was replaceable help with a sob story. Vanessa interrupted. "I never said that." I looked at her. "That is your warning for this part of the hearing." Her cheeks flushed. Rachel continued. She said Vanessa grabbed her wrist. The phone fell and the screen shattered. Rachel brought the repair estimate and a photograph of the damage. Then Rachel said Charles saw the argument. Vanessa looked up fast. I asked, "He was present?" Rachel nodded. He was in his chair near the kitchen doorway. And what did he do? Rachel swallowed. He told Vanessa to stop smiling. The room changed again. I turned to Vanessa. Did your father say that? She stared at me. He said many things. That is usually what people say when the one thing matters. Rachel's binder contained one more text from that same night. Rachel, your father saw you break my phone. Please just pay what you owe and I won't make this worse. Vanessa, my father sees what I tell him to see. I read that message aloud. The gallery went still. Vanessa's face lost more color. I asked, did you write that? She whispered. I was upset. No, you were clear. Then I returned to Charles's letter. The next paragraph explained the pendant. Charles wrote that the diamond pendant had belonged to his late wife, Elaine. Vanessa believed it was part of the Caldwell estate and wanted it locked away until she could properly manage family assets. But Charles had already given the pendant to someone else, not Rachel, not Tyler, not Vanessa. He had given it to his sister, Margaret Caldwell, 3 weeks before the accusation because Elaine had wanted Margaret to have it. I looked at Vanessa. That was the first time I saw fear reach her eyes, not embarrassment. Fear. I asked, do you have an aunt named Margaret Caldwell? Vanessa did not answer right away. Yes. Is she alive? Yes. Did you know your father gave her the pendant? Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. Rachel looked stunned. She had clearly not known that either. I asked again. Vanessa said, I heard something. You heard something, yet accused Rachel of stealing it. Vanessa's voice sharpened. My aunt is elderly too. My father was being influenced from every direction. That was a beautiful sentence for a person with no evidence. Influenced from every direction usually means disobeying me from one direction. I asked whether Margaret Caldwell was present. Rachel turned toward the gallery. An older woman in a navy coat stood slowly. She held a small purse in both hands and looked directly at Vanessa, not with hatred, but with a tired sadness that can be worse. Vanessa's face changed completely. The smile was gone now. Margaret Caldwell walked forward, opened her purse, and removed a small velvet pouch. When she placed it on the evidence table, the courtroom went silent. Inside was the diamond pendant. Rachel began crying, not because she wanted it, because its existence destroyed the lie that had been hanging over her name. Margaret looked at me and said, my brother gave it to me because Elaine asked him to. Vanessa knew. Vanessa shook her head. That's not true. Margaret reached into her purse again. This time, she removed a folded note. Then explain why you came to my house and demanded I give it back. Vanessa froze. Margaret handed the note to the bailiff. It was written in Vanessa's handwriting, short and sharp cop. Aunt Margaret, Dad is not thinking clearly. Return the pendant before this becomes a legal matter. I looked at Vanessa. Her face had gone pale. The millionaire's daughter, who had walked in, smiling at everyone now, could barely look at the evidence table. And I knew right then that the pendant was only the beginning, because if Vanessa knew Rachel had not stolen it, then the accusation was not a mistake. It was a weapon. Once Margaret Caldwell placed the diamond pendant on the evidence table, the case stopped pretending to be about a missing necklace. Rachel Morgan had not stolen it. Charles Caldwell had not imagined giving it away. And Vanessa Caldwell had known enough to threaten her own aunt before she ever walked into my courtroom and pointed suspicion at a working mother who could barely afford her son's medication. That is when I began to study Vanessa differently, not as a daughter protecting family property, as a woman using family property to protect herself. I asked Margaret Caldwell when Charles gave her the pendant. She said it was 3 weeks before Rachel was fired. Charles had asked her to come to the house on a Tuesday afternoon, while Vanessa was at a fundraiser luncheon. Rachel was there making soup in the kitchen. Tyler was doing homework at the table. Charles asked Margaret to sit with him in the study, and he gave her the pendant in the same velvet pouch she had brought to court. Margaret's voice was steady, but her hands were not. She said, "My brother told me Elaine wanted me to have it. She wrote it down years ago." Vanessa knew about that note, but she never liked it. I looked at Vanessa. "Did you know your mother wanted Margaret to have the pendant?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. "My mother said many sentimental things." "There it is again," I said. Vanessa blinked. "What?" "The pattern. When someone's wishes do not benefit you, they become sentimental. When someone's memory does not support you, it becomes confusion. When someone asks for wages, it becomes manipulation." The courtroom went still. Vanessa looked away first. That mattered. Rachel stood silently beside her table, tears drying on her face. She did not look victorious. She looked exhausted. False accusations do that to people. Even after the truth begins to appear, the body still feels the danger. I asked Rachel what happened after Vanessa accused her. Rachel said Vanessa sent messages late at night, demanding she return what she took. At first, Rachel thought Vanessa meant a receipt or a house key. Then Vanessa said the diamond pendant was missing and implied that Rachel had stolen it while Charles was resting. Rachel said she panicked, not because she had stolen anything, because she knew how it would sound. A wealthy family, a caregiver, a missing diamond, a single mother with bills, that combination can become a trap before evidence even enters the room. Rachel said Vanessa told her, "People will believe what makes sense." I asked if she had that message. Rachel nodded and handed it over. The text was real, Vanessa. "Return the pendant, and I won't make this public." Rachel, "I don't have any pendant. Please ask your father." Vanessa, "Dad is not reliable. People will believe what makes sense." I read that last line twice. People will believe what makes sense. What Vanessa meant was uglier than the words themselves. She meant people would believe the poor woman stole from the rich family. She meant Rachel's struggle could be used as evidence against her. She meant Tyler's medication bills, unpaid rent, broken phone, and need for work could be turned into motive. I looked at Vanessa and asked, "Did you write this?" She said, "I was trying to recover family property." "Family property that was sitting inside your aunt's purse." Vanessa's face flushed. Margaret looked down at the pendant, then back at her niece. "Vanessa, you knew I had it." Vanessa snapped, "You took advantage of Dad too." The gallery reacted softly. I raised one hand. Margaret's expression did not change. That kind of accusation had probably been thrown at her before. She said, "Your father was sick. He was not stupid." That sentence landed hard. Vanessa's smile was completely gone now. I turned to Rachel. "What did this accusation cost you?" Rachel took a breath, and for the first time all morning, she struggled to speak. She said Vanessa contacted another family Rachel had been interviewing with for weekend caregiving work. Rachel did not know exactly what Vanessa said, but the family canceled the interview and stopped replying. Rachel then missed Tyler's medication refill by 2 days and had to borrow money from her mother, who picked up extra cafeteria shifts despite pain in her knees. Rachel's voice broke. "My son asked if he did something wrong because I was crying in the car." That sentence hurt. Children often blame themselves for adult fear. They hear whispers. They see bills. They watch their parents become quiet. And because they do not understand money, lawsuits, or reputation, they assume the danger must somehow be their fault. I asked Rachel what she told Tyler. She said, "I told him grown-up problems are not caused by children." Then she looked down. But I don't know if he believed me. Vanessa shifted in her seat, annoyed rather than moved. I saw it, so did Rachel. And that was when I understood why Vanessa had been smiling earlier. It was not simple arrogance. It was distance. She needed emotional distance from the people she hurt, because if she saw them fully, Her story would not survive. I asked Vanessa whether she contacted Rachel's potential employer. Vanessa said, I made a courtesy call. A courtesy to whom? No answer. What did you say? I said there were concerns. What concerns? Integrity concerns. Rachel closed her eyes. There it was. The poison word integrity, a word vague enough to avoid specifics, sharp enough to damage a person's ability to work. I asked, did you tell them Rachel was accused of stealing? Vanessa hesitated. I said property was missing. Property you knew was with your aunt. I did not know that for certain. Margaret stepped forward slightly. You came to my house before that call. Vanessa looked at her. Margaret said, you stood in my doorway and told me if I didn't return the pendant, you would tell people Rachel took it because Rachel had more to lose. The courtroom froze. Rachel turned toward Vanessa in disbelief. I looked at Margaret. Do you have proof of that conversation? Margaret nodded. Vanessa's face changed, not anger this time, fear. Margaret removed her phone from her purse. She explained that after Charles warned her Vanessa might pressure her, she turned on the front porch camera audio whenever Vanessa came over. Margaret did not like technology, she said, but her grandson had installed the camera after a package theft. I allowed the audio to be played. At first there was wind, a door opening, then Vanessa's voice. Aunt Margaret, give me the pendant. Margaret's voice replied, Charles gave it to me. Vanessa said, Charles is not thinking clearly. Margaret answered, he knew exactly what he was doing. Then came the line that changed the entire courtroom. Vanessa said, then Rachel can explain why it disappeared. She needs money badly enough that everyone will understand. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. Her knees seemed to weaken. The bailiff moved slightly, watching her in case she needed support. The audio continued. Margaret said, you would blame an innocent woman? Vanessa replied, I would protect my family. I stopped the audio. There are sentences people use because they sound noble from a distance, protect my family. But inside that phrase, Vanessa had hidden something rotten. She was not protecting Charles. She was not protecting Elaine's wishes. She was not protecting Margaret. She was protecting inheritance, control, image, and her own authority over a house she did not own yet. I asked Vanessa, is that your voice? She stared at the table. Is that your voice? Yes, the gallery murmured. Vanessa looked up sharply, humiliated by the sound. That moment mattered. It was the first public crack. The wealthy daughter who had entered my courtroom, smiling now, had her own voice playing back as evidence of a planned false accusation. But the humiliation was not finished. I asked Rachel if she had anything showing Vanessa withheld wages after this. Rachel handed over a final payment statement Vanessa had written herself. It listed Rachel's hours, then subtracted $700 under property recovery hold. I looked at the paper. Property recovery hold. Vanessa said nothing. I asked, you invented a deduction for a pendant you knew Rachel did not have. Vanessa whispered, I thought Margaret might return it. That does not answer my question. Rachel's voice came softly. She told me if I kept asking for pay, she'd make sure no decent family hired me again. I looked at Vanessa. Vanessa did not deny it fast enough. That delay told the room everything. Then Rachel reached for one more item in her binder. It was a photograph of a handwritten calendar, her own calendar, not fancy, not typed, just blocks of days filled with hours worked, Tyler's medication times, school calls, rent deadline, and one small note written on a Friday. Ask Vanessa again, stay calm. I stared at that line for a moment, stay calm. A working mother had to remind herself to stay calm while asking a millionaire's daughter to pay wages already earned. That, to me, was the emotional truth of the case. Rachel said she wrote that because Vanessa often made her feel ashamed for needing money. She said every time she asked about pay, Vanessa would smile and say things like, "Rachel." Desperation makes people sound aggressive. Vanessa closed her eyes. I asked, "Did you say that?" She answered quietly, "I don't remember." "I do not believe you." The courtroom went silent. I do not say that lightly, but credibility is not a gift. It is earned or lost by conduct. Vanessa had lost a great deal of it. Rachel then told me about the night she finally stopped working for the Caldwells. Charles had been upset. Vanessa had told him Rachel was using Tyler as a sympathy card. Charles became angry and tried to stand. Rachel helped him back into the chair. Vanessa accused Rachel of touching him too roughly. Rachel said she left crying, with her broken phone in her bag, unpaid wages still missing, and Tyler waiting outside in her mother's car because he had a doctor's appointment the next morning. That night, Tyler had a seizure. The courtroom became completely still. Rachel said it was not Vanessa's fault. She made that clear. She was not trying to blame Vanessa for her son's condition, but she said stress, missed medication timing, and exhaustion had made that week worse. She spent the night in the emergency room holding Tyler's hand while her phone screen barely worked and messages from Vanessa kept appearing. "Return the pendant. Do not test me. You have no idea what my family can do." I read those messages. Vanessa stared at the table. The old smile was not only gone now, it seemed impossible that it had ever existed. I asked Rachel, "Why did you not file immediately?" She looked toward Margaret, then back at me. "Because Mr. Caldwell asked me not to give up on the truth, and because I was scared. People like Vanessa don't just accuse you. They make other people repeat it." That was one of the most accurate descriptions of power I had heard in a long time. People with influence do not always need to destroy someone directly. They only need to whisper into enough rooms until the person becomes unsafe to trust. I turned to Vanessa. You challenged this court's understanding of families like yours." Her face tightened. "So I am going to explain what I understand. I understand money, I understand inheritance, I understand reputation, but most of all, I understand when a person with power tries to turn another person's poverty into proof of guilt." Vanessa's eyes filled, but again, they were not soft tears. They were trapped tears. The kind that come when exposure has nowhere else to go. Then Margaret spoke again. "Your Honor, there is something else Charles gave me." Vanessa looked up, her face went white. I asked, "What is it?" Margaret reached into her purse one final time and removed a small silver flash drive. She placed it on the table beside the pendant. "Charles said if Vanessa ever blamed Rachel in court, you needed to see what happened in the study." Vanessa stood so suddenly, her chair scraped against the floor. "No." The whole courtroom turned toward her. For the first time, the millionaire's daughter did not look offended. She looked terrified, and I knew the next evidence would not just remove her smile. It would remove the story she had built her entire defense around. I did not allow the flash drive to be played immediately. Vanessa Caldwell was still standing, one hand gripping the edge of the table, her chair angled behind her from how suddenly she had pushed back. Her face was pale now. The polished courtroom smile, the rich daughter posture, the soft little laugh she had used to dismiss Rachel Morgan, all of it had disappeared. That is what evidence does when it gets close enough. It removes decoration. I looked at Vanessa and said, "Sit down." She did not move at first. The bailiff stepped forward. Then Vanessa sat slowly. For the first time since she entered my courtroom, she looked less like someone managing a hearing and more like someone trapped inside one. I turned to Margaret Caldwell. "Tell me where this flash drive came from." Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap of her purse. She was an older woman, but there was nothing weak in her eyes. Sad, yes. Tired, yes. But not weak. She said Charles had given it to her 2 days before he was taken back to the hospital. He called her late in the afternoon and asked her to come alone. When she arrived, Rachel was in the kitchen preparing his medication list, and Tyler was sitting quietly near the window, drawing baseball players on the back of an old envelope. Vanessa was not home. Charles asked Margaret to sit beside him in the study. Then he opened the desk drawer, removed the flash drive, and said, "If my daughter smiles in court, give them this." Rachel covered her mouth. Vanessa stared straight ahead. I asked Margaret whether she knew what was on it. She nodded. "Part of it. What did you see?" Margaret looked at Vanessa, then back at me. My brother asking Vanessa to pay Rachel, and Vanessa telling him she could make Rachel look like a thief. The courtroom became completely still. Rachel's eyes closed. She had already heard enough to know the accusation was planned, but there is a difference between suspecting someone tried to ruin you and hearing that the person you cared for had recorded the moment they decided to do it. I asked for the flash drive to be reviewed. Vanessa spoke quietly. "Your Honor, this is private family footage." I looked at her. "No, Miss Caldwell. When private family footage explains a public accusation made in my courtroom, it becomes evidence." Her lips pressed together. No smile, no reply. The screen turned on. The video opened in Charles Caldwell's study. The room was large, lined with dark shelves and framed awards. Through the camera angle, I could see Charles seated in a leather chair near the desk. His body looked frail, but his eyes were alert. He was holding a small remote, probably for the camera. Vanessa stood near the window, arms folded, wearing the same kind of expensive calm she had worn when she entered my courtroom. Charles said, "You owe Rachel money." Vanessa sighed. "Dad, you don't understand how staff works." Charles answered, "I understand work." That sentence was simple and devastating. Vanessa looked annoyed. "She has become too familiar. She brings her sick child into this house, and suddenly you think she is family." Rachel flinched when she heard that. I noticed so did Vanessa, and for a second, shame almost crossed Vanessa's face, but it passed too quickly to be trusted. Charles said, "Tyler is a good boy." Vanessa snapped. Tylo reaction moved through the gallery. Rachel kept her head down, but her shoulders stiffened. There it was again. The obsession with blood, ownership, status. Vanessa could not tolerate the idea that kindness might create a bond her inheritance could not control. On the screen, Charles leaned forward with effort. Elaine wanted Margaret to have the pendant. Vanessa said, "Elaine is gone." Charles answered, "Her wishes are not." Vanessa laughed once, but it was not her courtroom smile. It was colder. "You are letting a caregiver and her little boy rewrite this family." Charles looked directly at her. "No, I am watching them act more like one than you do." That line hit the courtroom hard. Vanessa at the defense table lowered her eyes. I paused the video. I asked, "Mrs. Caldwell, is that you?" She whispered, "Yes." "Is that your father?" "Yes." "Does he appear confused to you in this clip?" She did not answer. I let the silence sit. Then I resumed. Vanessa moved closer to the desk and lowered her voice. "You are making a mistake," Charles said. "My mistake was letting you speak for me too long." Vanessa's face hardened. "If you give Aunt Margaret that pendant, Rachel will be the one blamed. She has access. She needs money. She already looks desperate." Rachel began crying silently. That was the cruelty at the center of the case. Vanessa had not simply lied. She had chosen Rachel because poverty made the lie believable to strangers. Charles said, "Do not do that." Vanessa leaned over the desk. "Then stop humiliating me." The word revealed everything. Humiliating, not stealing, not safety, not family protection, humiliation. Vanessa was not afraid Rachel had taken something. She was angry that Charles trusted Rachel, listened to Rachel, defended Rachel, and allowed a working mother and her child to become emotionally important in a house Vanessa believed belonged only to the Caldwell name. Charles reached for a folder on his desk. Vanessa grabbed it first. Rachel looked up sharply. Margaret whispered, "That's the folder." I paused the videos again. "What folder?" I asked. Margaret swallowed. "Elaine's papers." The note about the pendant was in there. So was a list Charles made of what Vanessa owed Rachel. Vanessa's face tightened. I looked at Vanessa. "Where is that folder now?" She said, "I don't know." The answer was too small for the room. I asked again, "Where is it?" I said, "I don't know." Margaret said quietly, "You took it." Vanessa turned on her. "You don't know anything." The bailiff shifted. Vanessa caught herself and faced forward again. The flash drive continued. On the screen, Charles said, "Give me the folder." Vanessa held it against her chest. "No, you are not giving documents to outsiders. Rachel is owed pay. She is owed gratitude." The courtroom reacted. I stopped the video. Rachel's face crumpled. Those words explained every delayed payment, every sigh, every smile, every insult hidden behind politeness. She is owed gratitude. That is what exploiters tell themselves when they want labor without responsibility. I looked at Vanessa. "You heard yourself?" Vanessa's eyes were wet now, but she stayed silent. I resumed the clip. Charles's breathing became heavier. He pressed one hand to his chest, not dramatically, but enough that Rachel, visible in the doorway now, stepped forward. "Mr. Caldwell, do you need your medication?" Vanessa snapped. "Stay out of this." Rachel stopped immediately. That reaction told me how many times Vanessa had trained her to step back. Charles said, "Rachel, do not leave." Vanessa looked furious. Rachel stayed at the doorway, torn between care and fear. Then Tyler appeared behind her small kid, holding his backpack strap with both hands. Rachel immediately turned, trying to guide him away. But Charles saw him and softened. "Tyler," he said, "remember what I told you?" The boy nodded. "Keep score, even when the game looks bad." Rachel started crying harder in my courtroom. I understood why that was not just a baseball line. That was Charles telling a frightened child that things could still be counted honestly, even when powerful people tried to change the score. Vanessa on the screen looked disgusted. This is exactly what I mean, this emotional theater. Charles said, "No, Vanessa, this is what you never learned." The room froze again. Then the clip ended abruptly. The screen went black. But the flash drive contained another file. The second file was audio only. Margaret said Charles had recorded it the same night after Rachel and Tyler left. I allowed it to play. At first, we heard Charles breathing, then Vanessa's voice. "You embarrassed me in front of the help." Charles answered, "You embarrassed yourself." Vanessa said, "I can still fix this." "How?" There was a pause. Then Vanessa said, "I will report the pendant missing." Rachel had access. "She needs cash. Nobody will question it." Rachel whispered, "Oh my God." I watched Vanessa, her eyes closed, not in remorse, in defeat. The audio continued. Charles said, "I will tell them the truth." Vanessa replied, "You will tell them whatever I say you remember." That was the moment the gallery reacted openly. A wave of gasps moved through the room. Vanessa opened her eyes and looked humiliated, not by what she had done, but by the fact that strangers had heard it. I stopped the audio. The silence afterward was sharp. I asked Vanessa, "Did you tell your father he would remember whatever you said he remembered?" Her lips trembled. I was angry. That was not my question. She looked down. Yes. Rachel wiped her face. But she was no longer shrinking. Something in her had changed. The truth was no longer just in her binder. It was on the screen, in Charles's voice, in Margaret's testimony, in Vanessa's own words. I asked Margaret if she had the folder Vanessa took. She shook her head, no. But Charles told me he made copies. Vanessa's head lifted. That was the reaction I had been waiting for, copies. The word frightened her more than the recording. I asked, "Where are the copies?" Margaret looked toward Rachel. Margaret looked confused. Margaret said, "Charles said he hid them where Vanessa would never look." I waited. Margaret's voiceball scorebook. Rachel's face went blank. My son's what? Margaret said, Charles gave Tyler an old scorebook the last day they saw each other. He said it was for practice. Rachel turned pale. Vanessa stared at the table. I asked Rachel, do you have that scorebook? Rachel's voice shook. At home. Tyler keeps it by his bed. The courtroom shifted. That answer meant the final proof was not in a bank vault, not in a lawyer's office, not in a millionaire's study. It was beside a 9-year-old boy's bed, a boy Vanessa had dismissed as emotional theater. A boy whose illness she treated like a strategy. A boy Charles trusted more than his own daughter. I looked at Vanessa. For the first time, she looked truly frightened of a child. And that was where I stopped the hearing for a brief recess. Not because the truth had ended, because the next piece of evidence had to be brought in carefully. And when Rachel's mother later walked through those courtroom doors holding Tyler's baseball scorebook, Vanessa Caldwell's face told me the most shocking part of the case was still ahead. When Rachel's mother entered the courtroom, she was holding the baseball scorebook with both hands. Her name was Linda Morgan. She wore a hospital cafeteria uniform under a faded black coat, and she looked like a woman who had come straight from work without asking permission from exhaustion. Her shoes were practical. Her face was tired. But her eyes were awake in that sharp way mothers get when their child has been wronged. Rachel stood when she saw her. Mom Linda gave her one small nod, the kind that said, "Not now. Hold yourself together." Then she walked to the bailiff and handed over Tyler's scorebook. Vanessa Caldwell watched every step. Her face no longer had a smile, no longer had arrogance, and no longer had the polished mask she wore when she first entered my courtroom. She looked at that scorebook the way guilty people look at doors they forgot to lock. I asked Linda how she got it. She said, Tyler kept it beside his bed, exactly where Rachel said. When Rachel called during recess, Linda went to the apartment, found it under Tyler's baseball cards, and brought it straight to court. Tyler, she said, was at school with the nurse checking on him. Rachel's eyes filled again, but she stayed quiet. I opened the scorebook. At first, it looked ordinary. Names of teams, little boxes, pencil marks, Tyler's uneven handwriting, baseball numbers only a child learning the game would make with that much seriousness. Then I reached the back cover. A folded packet was taped inside. The tape had been placed carefully, not by a child, by an older hand that shook but still knew what it was doing. Across the packet, Charles Caldwell had written, "For the court." Tyler kept score. Now let the judge. The gallery went silent. Rachel covered her mouth. Vanessa closed her eyes. That was the moment her public humiliation truly began. Not because I raised my voice. Because the evidence had chosen the smallest person in the story to protect the largest truth. I removed the packet. Inside were copies of 3 documents. The first was Elaine Caldwell's handwritten instruction regarding the diamond pendant. It clearly stated that her sister-in-law, Margaret Caldwell, was to receive it after Elaine's death, not Vanessa, not the estate. Margaret II was a signed wage ledger written by Charles. It listed Rachel's hours, the extra weekends, the prescription reimbursements, and a note at the bottom. Vanessa keeps delaying payment. Rachel is owed every dollar. The third document was the one that made Vanessa grip the table. It was a signed statement from Charles dated 2 days before Rachel was fired. It read, "My daughter Vanessa has threatened to accuse Rachel Morgan of stealing the pendant if I continue defending her. Rachel has stolen nothing. Vanessa knows the pendant is with Margaret. If Rachel is accused, the accusation is false." The courtroom reacted before I said a word. A wave of gasps moved from the back row to the front. Margaret lowered her head. Rachel's knees weakened, and Linda moved beside her daughter without even being asked. Vanessa sat frozen. The evidence screen displayed the statement, large, clear, unavoidable, every word magnified. Vanessa knows the pendant is with Margaret. The gallery could see it. Rachel could see it. Vanessa could see it. And for the first time, the millionaire's daughter was not being protected by the size of her house, her father's name, or the smoothness of her voice. Her lie was 10 feet wide on a courtroom screen. I looked at her M's Caldwell. Look at the screen. She did not. I repeated, look at it. Slowly, Vanessa lifted her eyes. Her face collapsed, not into remorse, into exposure. I asked, is that your father's signature? Vanessa's lips trembled. I don't know. Margaret stepped forward. That is Charles's signature, Linda said quietly. And that is the truth. Vanessa turned toward Linda with a flash of anger. The bailiff moved. I said, do not even think about it. The room went completely still. Then I asked Vanessa again, is that your father's signature? She swallowed. Yes. Rachel began crying, not loudly. It was worse than loud crying. It was the quiet breaking of someone who had been called a thief while trying to pay for a child's medicine. I asked Vanessa, did you know the pendant was with Margaret when you accused Rachel? Vanessa stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I believed Rachel influenced him. That is not an answer. She inserted herself into our family. That is not an answer either. Her voice cracked. Yes, the courtroom erupted, not chaos. Shock, a sharp wave of whispers, hands over mouths, people turning to each other. Because sometimes even a courtroom audience cannot keep still when a lie finally falls apart in public. I struck my hand on the bench. Once, silence returned immediately. Vanessa looked humiliated. Her cheeks were red now, her eyes wet. Her expensive confidence had been stripped away until all that remained was a woman standing inside her own words. I asked, you knew Rachel did not steal the pendant. Vanessa whispered, yes, you withheld her pay anyway. Yes, you contacted a potential employer and implied she had integrity concerns. Vanessa's eyes closed. Yes, you used her financial struggle and her son's medical needs as reasons people would believe she stole. Her face tightened. I didn't say it like that. I leaned forward. Your own voice said she needed cash badly enough that everyone would understand. Vanessa did not answer. I looked toward the evidence screen. Put that line back up. The clerk replayed the audio from Margaret's porch camera. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom again. She needs money badly enough that everyone will understand. Rachel flinched. Linda turned her face away. The gallery gasped again, even though they had already heard it. That is how cruel truth works. It can hurt twice. I paused the audio. Vanessa was crying now. But the tears came too late to repair what her smile had done. I said, there it is, Miss Caldwell. That is not family protection. That is class prejudice with a legal threat wrapped around it. Vanessa looked up, stunned by the directness. Good. Some sentences should land where they belong. Then Linda Morgan asked if she could speak. I allowed it. She stood beside Rachel, still in her cafeteria uniform, and said, my daughter missed meals so Tyler wouldn't miss medicine. She worked in that house after double shifts, came home with swollen feet, and still defended Mr. Caldwell because she said he was kind. And you smiled while calling her a thief. The courtroom fell silent again. Vanessa could not look at Linda. That was the visual moment I knew viewers would remember if they had been watching. A millionaire's daughter in expensive clothes staring down at the table while a cafeteria worker described the cost of her cruelty. No argument, no smile, no comeback, just public shame, plain and visible. Rachel whispered, Mom, please. Linda touched her arm. I'm done, but her words had already done what they needed to do. They made the harm human, not legal. Human. I turned back to the scorebook. There was one more page inside the packet, a note for Tyler. I read it silently first. Then I asked Rachel if she wanted it read aloud. She nodded through tears. I read, Tyler, you are a good scorekeeper. You notice things adults missed. If anyone tells your mother she is less because she works hard, remember this. Honest work is never shameful. Taking from honest work is. Rachel broke down completely. Linda held her. Margaret covered her mouth. Even Vanessa cried harder, though I still could not tell whether she was crying for Tyler or for herself. Then Rachel's phone vibrated on the table. The sound was small, but everyone heard it because the room had gone so quiet. Rachel looked at the screen. Her face changed. I asked, "Is it the school?" She nodded, panic flashing across her face. I told her to answer. She stepped aside, listened, and closed her eyes with relief. Tyler was fine. The school nurse was only confirming that Linda had permission to pick him up later. Rachel thanked them and ended the call. When she returned, she was trembling, and I understood something then. Vanessa had used money like a weapon because she thought Rachel's life was small enough to crush. But Rachel's life was not small. It was full of a sick child, an exhausted mother, overdue bills, cracked phone glass, missed sleep, and a job where she still managed to make an old man feel less alone. That is not weakness. I looked at Vanessa. Stand up. She stood. The courtroom watched her. No smile, no lifted chin, no millionaire's daughter posture. Just a defendant, with her own lie displayed behind her. I said, "You challenged my understanding of families like yours. Now let me tell you what I understand. I understand that your father trusted Rachel because she showed up. I understand that your aunt told the truth because your father trusted her too. I understand that Tyler, a 9-year-old child you dismissed as emotional theater, carried the evidence that exposed you. And I understand that you used wealth, reputation, and a false accusation to punish a woman for needing the wages you owed her." Vanessa wiped her face. I was not finished. You did not come here mistaken. You came here prepared. And the only thing you were not prepared for was the fact that your father prepared better. That line hit the room like thunder. The gallery reacted openly. Vanessa's face crumpled. Rachel looked at the screen, then down at the scorebook, as if she still could not believe Charles had hidden proof in something Tyler loved. I asked Vanessa one final question before judgment. "Did Rachel Morgan steal anything from your father?" Vanessa shook her head. "Say it out loud." Her voice barely came out. "No," louder. Vanessa looked at Rachel. Rachel did not look away. Vanessa swallowed. "Rachel Morgan did not steal from my father." The courtroom went silent. That was the sound of a false accusation dying. But I still needed the last piece. I asked, "Did you owe her the wages listed in Charles Caldwell's ledger and in her time records?" Vanessa whispered, "Yes." And just like that, the smile that had walked into my courtroom was gone. Not faded, gone. Because Vanessa Caldwell had challenged the court with confidence, but the ending did not belong to her. It belonged to Rachel. It belonged to Tyler. And it belonged to a dead father who knew exactly where to hide the truth from a daughter who never thought to look inside a poor child's baseball scorebook. After Vanessa Caldwell said the words, the courtroom stayed silent. Rachel Morgan did not smile. That mattered to me. Some people imagine vindication as a dramatic moment where the injured person looks triumphant, where the villain lowers their head and the victim finally stands taller. But real vindication often looks quieter than that. Rachel looked relieved, yes, but she also looked drained, like the truth had arrived only after dragging her through every fear Vanessa had created. She had been called a thief. She had lost work. She had begged for wages already earned. She had watched her son's medical needs become part of someone else's accusation. And now, in open court, the millionaire's daughter had finally admitted what Rachel had known all along. Rachel Morgan did not steal from Charles Caldwell. I looked at Vanessa. Sit down. She sat without argument. That alone showed how much had changed. The woman who had walked in smiling, correcting, challenging, and performing superiority now moved like every person in that courtroom was watching the weight of her own words settle onto her shoulders. And they were. I reviewed the evidence one final time. The written agreement showed Rachel's hourly rate and duties. The text messages showed Vanessa approved extra hours and reimbursements. The receipts showed Rachel paid for Charles's medication. The repair estimate supported the damaged phone claim. Margaret Caldwell produced the pendant, proving Rachel never possessed it. The porch recording proved Vanessa planned to blame Rachel because Rachel needed money. The study recording proved Charles understood what his daughter was doing. And Tyler's baseball scorebook contained the signed statement that destroyed Vanessa's defense completely. There was no honest misunderstanding here. There was no missing context. There was no vulnerable father being manipulated by a caregiver. There was a wealthy daughter who used reputation as a weapon and poverty as a motive. I entered judgment for Rachel, unpaid wages. Prescription reimbursements, repair, the improper $700 deduction, court costs, and additional damages connected to the false accusation and the damage Vanessa caused to Rachel's ability to work. When I announced the total, Vanessa flinched, not because she lacked the money, because the judgment turned Rachel's pain into something official. That is important. People like Vanessa often believe harm does not exist until someone important recognizes it. That day, the court recognized it. I also ordered Vanessa to send written corrections to every person and family she had contacted about Rachel's so-called integrity concerns. Any prospective employer, any agency, any private household, any person who had heard, directly or indirectly, that Rachel Morgan was suspected of stealing from Charles Caldwell. Vanessa looked up, startled. "You want me to write that?" I said, "No, Miss Caldwell. I am ordering you to write that." Her mouth closed. I continued, "The correction will state that Rachel Morgan did not steal the pendant, that you knew the pendant was with Margaret Caldwell, and that any implication you made about Rachel's honesty was false." Rachel covered her mouth again. Linda Morgan put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. That correction mattered almost as much as the money. A worker's name is part of her survival. When someone with power damages it, repayment alone is not enough. The lie has to be pulled back from the rooms where it was placed. Then I addressed the recordings and Charles Caldwell's documents. I ordered copies preserved with the court record. I stated clearly that the matter raised issues that might extend beyond a simple civil claim. Potential financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, intentional false accusation, interference with wages, and possible destruction or concealment of family documents. Vanessa's face went pale again. I looked directly at her. This court is not making a criminal finding today, but evidence does not disappear because the hearing ends. It will be referred for appropriate review. Vanessa lowered her head. For a moment, she looked almost young, not innocent, just young in the way entitled people look young when the world finally stops bending around them. Margaret Caldwell asked whether she could return the pendant to her purse. I allowed it after it had been documented. She picked it up with both hands, not like a woman holding jewelry, but like a sister holding the last clear wish of someone she loved. Then she looked at Rachel. "My brother wanted you to know he never believed her." Rachel's face broke. "I know," she whispered. "Now I know." That was the part money could not purchase. Rachel had carried shame that did not belong to her. Charles had tried to take it off her before he died. It just took a courtroom, a scorebook, and a trail of evidence to finish what he started. Then Linda spoke softly. "Your Honor, Tyler will ask what happened. I looked at Rachel. Rachel nodded through tears. I said, "Tell him the truth in a way a child can carry. Tell him he helped protect his mother's name. Tell him Mr. Caldwell trusted him with something important because he saw goodness in him." Rachel cried harder at that. Vanessa looked away. That was when I addressed her one final time. Miss Caldwell, stand. She stood. No smile, no challenge, no expensive confidence. I said, "You entered this courtroom believing your father's wealth gave your story more weight than Rachel Morgan's records. You believed her bills made her suspicious. You believed her son's illness made her look desperate. You believed her work made her replaceable. And you believed your smile would make cruelty look civilized." The courtroom was completely still. "But your father saw you clearly. Your aunt saw you clearly. Rachel saw you clearly. And eventually this court saw you clearly." Vanessa's eyes filled again. I continued, "You were not protecting your family. You were protecting control. There is a difference. Family protection does not require framing an innocent woman. It does not require withholding wages from a mother buying medicine for her child. It does not require telling the world a caregiver is dishonest because your father respected her more than he feared you." Vanessa whispered, "I was angry." "Yes," I said, "and anger revealed you. It did not excuse you." Rachel looked up at that. Sometimes people need to hear the court say what they were never allowed to say. I turned back to Rachel Ems. "Morgan, you worked. You kept records. You cared for a man who was sick, lonely, and aware. You did not steal from him. You did not manipulate him. You did not bring your son into that house as a strategy. You brought him because you are a mother trying to survive, and Charles Caldwell treated him with kindness." Rachel nodded, crying silently. "And your son," I said, "should never be ashamed of needing care. Illness is not weakness. Poverty is not guilt. Honest work is not something to apologize for." Linda closed her eyes. Margaret wiped her face. Even the gallery remained quiet, as if everyone understood that the real ending of the case was not Vanessa losing money. It was Rachel getting back the part of herself Vanessa had tried to take, her name, her dignity, her right to be believed. When the hearing ended, Vanessa gathered her designer purse and sunglasses. She hesitated before putting the sunglasses on, then left them in her hand instead. Maybe even she understood that hiding her eyes would only make the moment look worse. At the courtroom doors, she stopped. For 1 second, I thought she might apologize to Rachel. Rachel looked at her too. So did Linda, so did Margaret. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. No apology came. She walked out without the smile she had arrived with. That did not surprise me. People like Vanessa often mistake exposure for punishment and never reach remorse. But a courtroom does not need a perfect apology to deliver justice. It needs facts. It needs proof. It needs the courage of people who show up, even when power tells them they will not be believed. Rachel remained standing after Vanessa left. She held Tyler's scorebook against her chest, and I could see her thumb resting over the tapes Charles had used to hide the documents. A child's baseball scorebook. That was where Charles Caldwell hid the truth, not in a safe, not in a bank. Not in a lawyer's office, in the one place Vanessa would never think to look, because she had dismissed the child as unimportant. That was her final mistake. She underestimated the caregiver. She underestimated the aunt. She underestimated her father. And most of all, she underestimated the little boy who kept score. Later, I thought about that phrase Charles had written, "Tyler kept score." Now let the judge. That is what court is supposed to do. Keep score when powerful people try to change the game. Keep score when someone turns poverty into suspicion. Keep score when a worker's labor is treated like a favor instead of a debt. Keep score when a smile is used to cover a lie. Vanessa Caldwell challenged me because she believed families like hers lived by different rules. She was wrong. In my courtroom, a last name does not testify. Money does not cross-examine evidence. A smile does not erase a recording, and a millionaire's daughter does not get to ruin a working mother's life simply because she thinks the world will believe what is convenient. That day, the ending shocked everyone because the truth did not come from wealth. It came from a caregiver's binder, an aunt's courage, a father's warning, and a sick little boy's baseball scorebook. Vanessa walked in smiling. Rachel walked out hurt. And if you ask me which one mattered more, I will tell you exactly what I told myself after that case ended. The smile was never the story. The truth was.